Here is Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker, who died as they lived, by the gun.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to go around, we're going to tell a story I find very intriguing, and it's one that stood the test of time, and it's got a lot of twists and turns, and it's just one that, depending on who you ask, whose perspective of the story you're listening to, you're going to get a lot of different things out of it. But as a child, I remember hearing the name Bonnie and Clyde in a lot of different contexts. And as I've gotten older, I've heard the story in its entirety as told to us and others that weren't there, and probably not through the perspective of the families. Because if you ask the families, you're probably going to get a whole nother perspective. But from the moment that Bonnie and Clyde met in 1930 to the moment they died in 1934, that gap and in between, you got two people that absolutely were crazy about each other, and they embarked on a journey that would ultimately end with the two ending their lives together. So here on the American Dream Channel, we're going to go around, you're going to follow me, and we're going to go around and we're going to see some places, and we're going to talk about the life and journey that was Bonnie and Clyde. Let's go. All right, everybody, so this location right here, this is one I was really wanting to see, and unfortunately, if you see, there's not a lot going on here on this piece of property. But what it is, let me rephrase that, what it was where Clyde Barrow's family home once stood. And I'm going to show you some pictures and we'll kind of match up where the structure used to be. Hold on. We got first responder vehicle going by. So anyway, I'm going to show you some photos, and we'll kind of try to lay out where stuff was once upon a time. But in all the photos, you can see this building over here, this red building. It looks like it was painted because it looks orange in most of the photos I see. And obviously the structure was once right here. There was kind of somewhat of an awning. There was an awning right here in this area. Obviously nothing is here no more. And like I said, had I not procrastinated and I got off my butt, came out and started my YouTube journey sooner, a year sooner, well actually a little over a year, because they tore it down in April of 2022. I'd have been able to see the structure. But this is where the Barrow family fueling station and house was once upon a time. Procrastination, missed out. So one thing about this that like I said, I kicked myself in the butt for, is because I've been wanting to do this. Been wanting to go out on YouTube. I've been wanting to create content to share with people, share with the world. And this is a story that I wrote down in my notebook and said, this is a story I got to do. Get this thing started. Bonnie and Clyde's story is an absolute must. And when I decided to finally do it, obviously I started researching it. And when I was getting addresses and locations of places I knew I had to go, this was one of them. And when I read it, it said, Clyde Barrow, family home and service station, gone. Gone because they had tore it down. I believe there was a group of people that tried to preserve it. In the end, it didn't happen. It's gone. So my first thought was, should I even go out there? And then my next thought was, which you'll find out later in the video, I go to a couple other locations where there's nothing there anymore. So I had to tell myself, it's not about what's there now. It's about what was there. And the thought that I can imagine young Clyde or his brothers and his sisters playing out here on this property, you know, people coming, you know, contributing to the family business, paying his father for fuel or whatever else they sold there. I don't know if there was some type of automotive service or any type of beverages or food, or if it was just fuel. But it's crazy to think about. So yes, absolutely I had to come here. And I did. And like I said, you saw the piece of property where it once stood. I showed a couple photos, matched up some shots. Pretty much there's a lot of new stuff in the surrounding area, but we made it. We came here. All right, everybody, let's move on to the next spot in the journey. So I had to stop at this location. This building right here was, well, it still is Eagle Ford District 49 school. It was an elementary school. Now, this school's significance is the fact that Bonnie Parker went here as a child. And it's since been painted. I'm going to post some images right now up. But if you look right there, you see how they had the girls' entrance on this side? And if you make your way around the building, you got the old flagpole. Now, I don't know if that was the original flagpole that was here. I really hope it is. Like I said, we'll show some images. It says built in 1923. But for some reason, when I did my research, it looked like it said it was an operating school from 1916 all the way through the 60s. Make my way around here to the front of the school. I found some old photos, and they showed some images of people, students sitting on the front of these steps here, taking their class photos. This is awesome. Absolutely awesome. Anyway, I just wanted to stop here real quick because I thought it was a good part of the story to add in that this was a school she attended. I could imagine when she attended this school at that time, she wasn't thinking about the fact that she was going to end up with somebody, fall madly in love, and they were going to cause such a path of destruction and both end their lives together. But anyway, so right here, if you look, all that water and nasty looking area down there, all that grassy area, that was once upon a time a campground for squatters. Even though you see the Dallas skyline in the background, it actually wasn't considered Dallas yet. This was Kemet County. And it wasn't considered Dallas till the early 50s. But this is where Clyde Barrow and his family lived in a tent with hundreds of other people. Because they had nothing they could do. There was nothing else to do. Could you imagine living down here in a tent? Crazy. Absolutely crazy. So not only were the 30s bad in general, they were bad, but you know, you got those people that were trying to make it, and obviously some people were forced into doing things that were not good. And obviously Clyde was forced in that life. Bonnie was with him. They were together, so ultimately they were in it together. They were both living that life. But anyway, could you imagine living down here on this area with a tent? Some people do it. And there's lots of areas around this city where people are in tents or sleeping on the ground. And one day I'll tell you a little bit of my background. So before I say what I'm about to say, but it's all a choice. Everything we put ourselves through and every situation we get in life is a choice. And ultimately we can find our own way out if we choose to. But sometimes the options are difficult hurdles to jump. But in the end, if we want to make it, we can make it. But we got to make that choice. Squatters camp. Clyde Barrow family lives. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to my next location that I'm going to show you. And this location is very historic. It has significance. And it used to be, once upon a time, Ma Canfield's Cafe in Gibsland, Louisiana. This is actually the cafe where Bonnie and Clyde stopped before they were ambushed by officers, and they got a meal to go. They took it with them, and it would obviously be their last meal. So we're going to go inside what is now the Bonnie and Clyde Ambush Museum and See what we can find. Real quick before I go in, this is what it looks like. Ambush Museum, Bonnie and Clyde. It's a very, very small town, and after we finish here, we will go down to where they were ambushed at, which is in this direction, 8 miles down the road, that direction. But right now, let's go inside the Ambush Museum, see what we can find. All right, everybody. So we just entered the Ambush Museum, and I talked to the owner, and he said that basically the part that we're in was actually Ma Canfield's restaurant. This is where they purchased their last meal. If you go to the attached building right next door, you will see that it is still a small cafe, and it's actually was a small grocery store at the time. So the museum itself was and is actually where they purchased their last meal from, and it is where they eventually left to ride off into their death. Now, there's a lot of quite cool stuff around here. If you look right here, this is all old stuff. This was at the time when they were searching for them. They were looking for them. Different wanted reward posters. Obviously, Clyde's mugshot. Real cool stuff. Picture of Bonnie. Crazy stuff. Some small stuff. If you look at this, really old brush in there. Look at that bath soap. Insane. I mean, obviously, for me, it's insane, and for any of us nowadays to see this type of old stuff. What do they got right there? Skin freshener. Don't know whether that's some type of lotion. Don't know whether that's some type of perfume. Definitely looks like an old bottle. Old glove there. I find it crazy that in the turn of the century that women wore gloves as much as they did. Crazy stuff. So I'm walking around the museum, and there's quite a bit of old stuff in here. There is some very awesome things in here. Like I just showed you, the old bath soap, skin freshener, just stuff that was probably normal for the time. But it's intriguing when you see old packaging and you see old materials or old clothing, old fashion, anything that's usually old or way before your time. I find it intriguing. I think it's awesome. Telling the story same way. At the time, it was a big deal, maybe because we're searching for them as far as law enforcement searching for them. Nothing unusual. Searching for criminals, going around looking for them. Eventually, they caught them. Obviously, they had no desire to arrest them, but they did have a desire to take them out. So I find it interesting. Just the story in itself, or anything about the times, way before our time, I find it interesting. So I'm going to show you a few things right now as we walk around the Ambush Museum that I also find very interesting. So, all right, guys, let's keep looking. So right here, this wall right here, very old firearms. If I'm not mistaken, and we're going to go ahead and get a little bit closer, we're going to read this. It says, the Remington shotgun taken from Bonnie and Clyde death car near Gibsland by law enforcement officials. So the Remington shotgun. The Remington that was in their vehicle at the time. They were ambushed. When they cleared the car out, that was in possession. That was in their possession. Crazy. You see these small pistols right here? Absolutely amazing. Easily concealable. Very old. I find this one right here very intriguing. It's like something you'd see out of an old mobster movie in the 30s. Obviously, it's from the 30s, so I'll show you some other stuff down here. Wow. Obviously, photos taken of them after they were removed from their vehicles. Yeah, they weren't playing around with this. It was a spectacle for them. They wanted people to know what they did, and they wanted to know they took care of them. Right here's a photo of Clyde. This is him on the table when they were doing the embalming. And right next to it is also a photo of Bonnie. Same thing, on the table as they were embalming her body. Right here, they got these headstones. Now, like I said, I will be going and showing you the real deal, but these are pretty much replicas, and obviously they're not buried here, but they're replicas of what their gravestones actually look like. And they say the same things on them that we will see when we go see their actual gravestones. They are exact replicas. So when we go see them, you will see the similarities between the two. So right here, we have a replica car. This was a replica. It's not the actual car. The actual car, I believe, is in Primm, Nevada, which we will go see. But this is supposed to be somewhat of a reenactment of how things ended up, somewhat of how the car looks. This is supposed to be what they looked like after they were taken out. Obviously, these are mannequins. This is not real, but it's supposed to be a reenactment. Very similar type car. Can you imagine driving these cars back in the day? It's crazy how we've came, or excuse me, how far we came in our automobile journey. But similar car to what they were driving. Very similar. Far away from the replica, we have another vehicle over here. Now, this one looks pretty nice, if you don't mind me saying. It's cool. I could imagine driving one of these. Looks like a nice interior. Man, these things are awesome. I think these vehicles look so awesome. I would love to get my hands on one of these one day. From this decade. This era, I should say. Absolutely awesome. Actually, we're going to make our way over here. They have another vehicle inside the museum. Man, this is nice. I would love to get my hands on this baby right here. Could you imagine? Could you imagine driving this? Look how narrow the tires were. Look at that. Nowhere near the size of what our tires are these days. Man. Freaking awesome. That was their rear views. Awesome. Identify Clyde and Bonnie in war crimes. Bodies here. Dallas Sentinel. Wow. This was big. I can imagine. I wonder what it was like when this was going on. And just the buildup. The crimes, the search, before they were ambushed, before they were killed. Could you imagine? I mean, what it was like? It's probably like any other story that we read today. I mean, they were probably reading about the newspaper every day. Their name was out there. Everybody knew what was going on. It took about, we were almost hit the 100-year mark. Matt, see how the story's just taking a life of its own? And I bet you it was nothing like that back then. It was just two people causing mayhem, causing havoc, heartache, that were eventually taken out. Back here in the far right corner of the building, you have what's meant to be their bodies as they were on a table after the ambush. Pretty creepy, if you ask me. This is intended to be Clyde. That is intended to be Bonnie. And that was when the end. Clyde right here. Blood coming out of his mouth. Could you imagine? I mean, just the thought. Well, there was no thought. You know, as they just started unloading on them, these officers, They probably didn't even know what hit them. Bonnie. This is after they got him out of the vehicle, put him on the table. I mean, they were absolutely blasted. It's insane. I believe that was Bonnie's hand because it was pretty much almost blown off. Crazy. Kind of got a picture in color. That famous blue shirt that Clyde was wearing. Crazy. The way that they put these mannequins in the back, it's absolutely crazy. But again, you know, just the story itself is an absolutely unique one. It's a crazy one. And most people, they don't even really know much about it. They know the name Bonnie and Clyde, but they don't really know the story. I think if we could tell more people the story and they could hear it, not just for the entertainment factor, but for the fact that, hey, our minds can be consumed and brainwashed by many different things if we're not alert, whether it's falling in love, making decisions that we know are not right, but we're doing them in the name of love, or, you know, just hate. You know, our passion to hate and our feeling of hate can drive us to do things that we wouldn't normally do. So you just got to be aware. It's not just listen to the story for the entertainment factor, but listen to it because these were young kids who made bad decisions and ultimately paid for it with their lives. This is one that I've been wanting to see ever since I've been wanting to do this story. This phone right here. So if you look at it, it says this was the phone used by Frank Cameron, Ted Hinton, when they called Sheriff Schmidt and Lee Simmons to tell them the job was done. Bonnie and Clyde were dead. Crazy. Most kids wouldn't even know what the heck this is if they just looked at it and were told to guess. But in the 30s, this was a phone sitting outside of a service station. There's an actual picture of the cafe before it was what it is now. And look at this takeout bag. That's probably what their food was put in before they took their trip, their last 8-mile trip down the road, and were ambushed. Kevin Costner, he played a Louisiana officer in a Bonnie and Clyde movie. Wow. Awesome. If you actually look right here, this is his hat. Ted Hinton's hat. Awesome. Alright, so as we head out from the Ambush Museum, I'm going to take you down the road, down Highway 154. We're going to head out to the location where it all ended. Let's go. Hey everybody, here we are. Here we are. We are 8 miles down the road from the Ambush Museum, which once was the cafe Bonnie and Clyde had their last meal. They purchased 2 sandwiches, a BLT for Bonnie and a fried bologna sandwich for Clyde. Now, that's where we just came from, and amazing people, amazing ownership, and an amazing place. You should go see it if you have a chance or the opportunity. But anyway, this is the site. This is where the ambush happened. I'm here now on this stretch of road, 154 highway, 8 miles outside of Gibsland, and man, I found myself as I was driving over here. You know, I told my wife, I said, just having casual conversation. Could you imagine what the conversation was between Bonnie and Clyde as they were making that last 8-mile stretch they would ever make in their lives? What was the conversation? What were they talking about? I mean, I like to think of things like that. It intrigues me. Maybe it's meaningless. It may not have nothing to do with my life, but it was something big. It is history, and it happened. And, you know, there's both sides to the story. I mean, there's their side. There was Bonnie and Clyde's thing that was going on, their world, their thing, and obviously there was law enforcement. Their world, their thing. Two different things, two different worlds. In the end, they were going to collide. In the end, they did. And this is actually where it ended. But, I mean, I find myself intrigued by what was that conversation? What was that trip like? They had absolutely no idea that it was going to come to an end at this point. I would like to think they weren't so naive as to think that what they were doing was going to last forever. I mean, come on, when you're a criminal, you got to know at some point it's going to come to an end. Either you're going to put a stop to it yourself and change your ways, or somebody's going to put a stop to it for you. And that's just the way it is. I don't think there's no other way to look at it. There's not going to be any alternate ending. It's one or the other. But anyway, this is it. This is where it ended. Somewhere on this road, obviously, they got a landmark, somewhat of a monument to signify what happened on that day. But I don't think it signifies the exact area where they lit that car up and ended Bonnie and Clyde's reign of terror. But it was somewhere right here. It was somewhere here. I would like to know it. There's so many trees around. I would like to know, where were those law enforcement officers standing? Where were they waiting, knowing that they were coming down the road at some point and they were going to have their shot, their chance, no pun intended, their chance to put an end to it. And like I said, ultimately they did. This is where it ended. Real quick, we're going to go over here and take a look at this monument and see what it has to say. So anyway, all right, guys, here it is. This was it. You can see the gunshot indentions in the stone. People firing shots to honor it. There it is. Man. That's why this thing is here. That's who erected it. Man. This is it. This is the site. May 23rd, 1934. Clyde Barrow, Bonnie Parker were killed by law enforcement officers. Crazy. You know, if it happened in this day and age, you know there would have been an arrest made, as long as there wasn't an issue or any reason for the officers to use deadly force. They would have arrested them. The justice system would have took its course, and ultimately anything could have happened. Could have been life in prison. Could have been a certain amount of time. They were going to go away. Could have been the death penalty. Could have been anything. Now, we do know there are some bad situations with officers these days where bad things happen. I think more times than not, there's a lot of good officers out there who are going to do their job right and take pride in it. But that's not always the case. But 1934 was a way different time. Way different time. And there wasn't going to be no arrest made. Those law enforcement officers knew there was no arrest. They were hiding somewhere along this stretch of highway. Maybe they were over in these trees right here. Maybe somewhere over in these trees right here. Or maybe both. But they knew they weren't there to make an arrest. They were waiting for them to come down this road, because this is the direction they came from. And they knew what they were going to do. And they did. And this is where it ended. The end of the road. Again, no pun intended. For Bonnie and Clyde. Now let's go see the final resting place of the two young lovers. Look at these old fuel pumps. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. Nothing like the ones we have now. Even got the rolling dials for the gallons and the sale. But the reason this one's significant is we walk over here. You see this sign? We showed you the phone inside the Ambush Museum. The call was made. Well, this is where that payphone was. This is it. This is where Frank Hammer made the call to Colonel Lee Simmons to let him know that the job was done. Bonnie and Clyde were dead. It was over. This is where it was. Once upon a time, this was an active fueling station. This was the store. Those were the gas pumps. And this is where the call was made. Kind of walk around the building and see Obviously, I just showed you one across the street from it that really caught my eye. This one's also catching my eye. Seems like it's obviously a very old facility. This was around in the 30s. So we know this was here. The one I just showed you that originally caught my eye. And I decided to go there first before I came over here. I wonder if that was there too. You can see the roof structure. Kind of like something you would see in like Mexico. My wife, she's from that area. Seems like the type of roofing structure that would be on there. Type of stone. But anyway, right there. Some old buildings. I kind of wonder if they were also here. Anyway, there they are. Crazy. This story has lots of crazy stops and lots of crazy twists in it. We all know how it ended. It's crazy to look at it and see it now. You really don't even see any payphones around anymore. And if you do, they're not active. But to think even in, as my childhood in the 90s, payphones, I used to stop at payphones to call family. And to think that maybe 30, 40 years after, all the way to 100 years, you could go back to a location and you remember for what it was, and it could be completely different. Could you imagine what the people who were around when this thing was active and in its prime, its heyday, what they would think now? But anyway, guys, let's move on. All right, everybody. So we've just visited Gibsland, Louisiana, and our next stop, at least the first one, is Western Heights Cemetery here in Dallas, Texas. Let's go take a look around. All right, everybody, so as we walk down this path, little path of brick laid out for us. And now real quick, I want you to just look off to my right of the screen. You see that? They got a headstone just sitting there kind of off in the middle of nowhere, off the beaten path. Roy Whittington, 1903 to 1934. Either he was already 31 or he was going to turn 31. But nothing else there said. Come down a little way before you get to where we're trying to go. And Ava Whittington died March 4th, 1917. That's it. No date of birth. But here we go. This is the Barrow family headstones. Right over here, Elvin W. Barrow, 1894 to 1947. Henry B. and I'm probably going to butcher this name, Kumi T. Barrow, 1874, 1957. 1874, 1942. And this one right here. Here we go. Clyde C. Barrow, March 24th, 1909. May 23rd, 1934. Right next to Marvin Barrow. Here it is, guys. The final resting place of the man himself, Clyde Barrow. So like I said, everybody, first thing I noticed when I walked in here, this is a very old cemetery. Clearly it's not used anymore. It's overgrown in most areas. I'm sure they do keep up with it to an extent, but I'm sure it was prime real estate back in the 30s when Clyde was buried here. I'm sure it was an active cemetery. I'm sure it was fairly new. And when I say new, I mean it not being around that long. People were willing to bury their loved ones here after they passed, but definitely not in use anymore. It's very old. There's some gravestones here that I think have been removed or either just beaten and tattered so much by the weather that they're pretty much non-existent anymore. But Clyde's is still here. It's one of the biggest ones in the cemetery. So I think his will stand the test of time, at least for a little while longer. We're getting close to hitting the century mark on their death. Another 11 years. Another 11 years. It'll be 100 years ago that it happened. But anyway, I think that as we've went around and seen some of the places that they were going through and things they'd done and places they'd been, and it all just seems like it was a very live fast, die young type scenario. Like a James Dean movie. Or like James Dean's life, period. But yeah, they definitely stuck by each other when things were looking tough. And in the end, we know what happened. But after we leave here, we're going to go see Bonnie Parker's grave. See what that one's like. From what I hear and from the pictures I see, it's quite a bit different, the cemetery she's buried at. But anyway, here we are. Western Heights Cemetery. This is where they buried Clyde Barrow and other members of the Barrow family. There it is. Let's go check it out. So here we are. As I walked around, this was a lot easier to find than when I went and looked at Oswald's grave, when I did the Lee Harvey Oswald video. But it's pretty easy to find without using Find a Grave. So if you notice, got a couple bullets, a couple bullet rounds on there. And I think if I heard it correctly, basically they said, and I believe it was Clyde's family who said they didn't want them buried together. So Bonnie's gravestone reads, "As the flowers are all made sweeter by the sunshine and the dew, so this old world is made brighter by the lives of folks like you." Crazy stuff. You know, if there's one thing about the story of Bonnie and Clyde that I think is interesting, I can really relate it to, and I mean, people might think this is crazy, Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet, young kids, madly in love. In the end, they would die for each other, and they did. But in the case of Bonnie and Clyde, they were young, they were in love. Now, this is all folklore, folktale to anybody nowadays. You know, this day and age, it's just a story passed down. Obviously, it was a reality. It's factual, but the details, you know, what was their relationship like? How'd it go? Obviously, they ride and died all the way till the end. But, you know, when I look at it, I think that it's somewhat similar to the Romeo and Juliet story. They loved each other. They were young. They stuck by each other. They did everything together, you know. And at least as it goes, in the end, it seemed like their families weren't exactly the best of friends. And I'm sure it was that way in life. But I would say that for the most part, you can call it a love story, you can call it a horror story, because they did some bad things. Thing is, I really don't know, only going by what you've heard or what we've heard. You know, thinking about the 1930s, there was a lot of organized crime, and people did a lot of stuff to get money, take care of their families. But I can't really say much about how their lives were and how they lived, only by what we know when the stories were told. But I think it makes you wonder, had they not got ambushed that day on, let me look at it, May 23rd, 1934. I was looking at the gravestone, I'm standing right in front of it. Didn't remember the date. So if they weren't ambushed that day and killed by those officers, how long would they have lasted? Was it just, you know, a matter of time before it happened down the road if it didn't happen that day? Was it their destiny regardless of how things went? I think it's an amazing story. I think no matter what year it was, what decade it was, what century it is, I think the human emotion will always be the same. No matter how things change in this world, the human emotion is going to be the same. The fact that we can love, the fact that we can hate, the fact that we can care so much for something, and the fact in some cases we can hate something so much. It's the nature of the human heart and the human mind. But I think those two had something special, obviously. If she was willing to stick by him and he willing to stick by her through all the stuff that was going on. But in the end, I think Bonnie and Clyde is, to most people, a great story with a not so happy ending, depending on who you ask. But they stuck it out till the end, and it didn't end pretty. Anyway, American Dream Channel, y'all, like and subscribe. And remember, go see the things you want. Go do the things you want. Go meet the people you want to meet. And dream big.